The pristine marble floors of the Bellevue Grand Hotel reflected the crystalline light from chandeliers overhead as Knox Blackwood strode through the lobby, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the polished surface. At 32, he'd mastered the art of commanding attention without seeking it. His perfectly tailored navy suit and the quiet confidence in his steel-gray eyes spoke of success earned through relentless determination. "Mr. Blackwood, your usual suite is ready," called out Dominic, the hotel's longtime concierge, hurrying forward with a practiced smile. Knox gave him a brief nod, already scrolling through emails on his phone. Another acquisition was about to close. Riverstone Technologies would be the latest addition to his growing empire of software companies. 10 years of strategic moves had transformed him from a coding prodigy into one of Silicon Valley's youngest billionaires. "The board members are waiting in the chrysanthemum room for the pre-signing briefing," Dominic added, falling into step beside Knox. "And Mrs. Thaddeus called to confirm your attendance at tonight's charity gala." Knox suppressed a sigh. His stepmother, Cordelia Thaddeus Blackwood, never missed an opportunity to parade him at social events even now. The fact that he'd built his fortune independently of his late father's shipping company didn't stop her from trying to maintain the illusion of one big happy family. As they approached the elevator, a small commotion near the front desk caught Knox's attention. A young girl, no more than 10 years old, was arguing with the receptionist. Something about her struck him, perhaps the determined set of her jaw or the way she held herself with surprising poise for a child. Her dark curls were pulled back in a neat braid, and she wore a simple but well-kept blue dress. "I told you I need to speak with Mr. Blackwood." "It's important," the girl insisted, her voice carrying across the marble expanse. Knox paused, his finger hovering over the elevator button. There was something hauntingly familiar about her features, though he couldn't place it. The receptionist noticed him watching and gave an apologetic wave. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Blackwood. We're handling the situation," she called out, turning back to the girl. "Sweetheart, as I explained, you can't just walk in and demand to see one of our guests. Where are your parents?" The girl's response made Knox's world tilt on its axis. "My mother's name was Juniper Reeves," she said clearly, her eyes finding Knox's across the lobby. "And according to her letters, my father is standing right there." Knox felt the ground shift beneath his feet as memories of Juniper flooded back, her infectious laugh, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, those endless summer nights in Newport Beach when they were barely 20. He'd met her while developing his first startup, living on ramen and dreams in a cramped apartment. Juniper had been waiting tables at the diner where he spent countless hours coding, bringing him extra coffee with a smile that made his heart skip. They'd fallen hard and fast, two young souls convinced they could conquer the world together. But then came the offer from Vector Dynamics, the opportunity that would launch his career. They needed him to relocate to Singapore immediately for an 18-month contract. Juniper had her own dreams. She'd just been accepted to art school in California. The night before he left, they'd agreed to take a break, to let each other pursue their paths. He tried to contact her when he returned, but she'd moved away, her phone disconnected. He told himself it was for the best. "Mr. Blackwood?" Dominic's concerned voice pulled him back to the present. The lobby had grown quiet, other guests pretending not to stare at the unfolding drama. The girl took a step forward, her chin raised with a determination that mirrored his own. "My name is Ren," she said, her voice steady despite the slight trembling of her hands. "Mom? She passed away 3 months ago. Cancer." She pulled a worn envelope from her small backpack. "She wrote me letters explaining everything. About you, about why she never told you about me. She said you had your dreams and she didn't want to be the reason you gave them up." Knox's throat tightened. Juniper always thinking of others first. Even in what must have been her darkest hours, she'd thought of him. The board members? He began mechanically, then stopped himself. Dominic was already pulling out his phone, understanding without being asked. "I'll reschedule the meeting, sir," he said quietly. "And have some refreshments sent up to your suite?" A woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair hurried through the lobby doors, slightly out of breath. "Ren. Thank goodness." She stopped short at the tableau before her. "I'm so sorry," she ran ahead when she saw the hotel. "I'm Margaret Reeves, Juniper's aunt. I've been caring for Ren since—" She trailed off, her eyes moving between Knox and the girl. Knox studied Ren's face, really looked at her. Juniper's curls, his gray eyes, the same stubborn set to her jaw. How had he not seen it immediately? His phone buzzed, probably Cordelia wondering why he wasn't at the meeting. For the first time in years, business could wait. "Would you both join me upstairs?" he asked, his voice rougher than usual. I think we have a lot to talk about. As they walked to the elevator, Knox noticed Ren clutching a small, worn sketchbook, the same brand Juniper always carried. Some part of him knew that everything was about to change, that the carefully ordered world he'd built was about to be turned upside down. And surprisingly he found himself ready for it. The elevator doors closed silently behind them, carrying them up to a conversation 12 years in the making. In his pocket, Knox's phone continued to buzz with messages about the Riverstone acquisition, board meetings and charity galas. But for once, the future tech mogul was thinking only of the past, and the little girl who'd walked into his lobby carrying pieces of a life he'd left behind. The presidential suite of the Bellevue Grand stretched out before them, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city Knox had helped reshape with his tech innovations. Ren walked straight to the windows, pressing her hand against the glass as she looked down at the world below. The gesture was so much like Juniper's that Knox had to look away for a moment. She used to draw the city from high places, Ren said suddenly, opening her sketchbook. Mom, She said it helped her see the bigger picture. She turned the pages carefully, revealing detailed sketches that made Knox's chest tighten. Juniper's distinctive style hadn't changed, cityscapes that somehow captured both reality and dreams, architectural precision mixed with ethereal beauty. Margaret settled onto one of the cream-colored sofas, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Juniper wanted to tell you, Knox. So many times. But then your company took off and your face was everywhere. Magazines, television, billboards. She saw you were building something extraordinary. Knox ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. She should have told me. I would have. Given up everything? Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. That's exactly what she feared. Junie watched you change the world with your innovations. The medical software your company developed? It helped her through her treatments. She was so proud, knowing her daughter's father was making a difference. Ren turned from the window, her face a complex mix of emotions that seemed beyond her years. I have all her letters. She pulled them from her backpack, held together with a faded blue ribbon. She wrote them every year on my birthday. Said that someday when the time was right, they'd help me understand. Knox's phone buzzed again, this time with a message from his half-brother, Thaddeus. Where are you? Mother's livid, boards threatening to kill the Riverstone deal. He silenced it without responding. Did she? Knox cleared his throat. Was she happy? Margaret's eyes softened. She built a beautiful life, Knox. Became a respected artist, taught at the community college. Everything she did was for Ren. But there was always a part of her that belonged to that summer with you. Ren opened one of the letters, her fingers tracing her mother's handwriting. She wrote about the night you got your first investment deal. How you burst into the diner at midnight, picked her up and spun her around, both of you laughing like crazy people. She said that's when she knew you were meant for bigger things than a small-town love story. A memory hit Knox with stunning clarity, the weight of Juniper in his arms, the smell of coffee and hope in the air, their whole lives stretched out before them like an endless highway. He'd been so focused on the destination, he'd forgotten the journey's sweetest moments. The comfortable silence was broken by a sharp knock. Dominic entered with a silver tray of hot chocolate and cookies, his practiced professionalism masking any curiosity about the situation. As he arranged the treats on the coffee table, Knox noticed Ren eyeing the hot chocolate with poorly concealed interest, another echo of Juniper, who'd always claimed that chocolate was the solution to life's biggest challenges. Your sister-in-law, Mrs. Clayton, called the front desk, sir, Dominic said quietly. She mentioned something about damage control and PR strategies? Knox felt a flash of irritation. Of course Cordelia had already involved Brinley. His half-sister had built her career managing the family's public image, turning potential scandals into PR victories. But this wasn't some corporate crisis to be managed. This was his daughter, holding letters from the only woman he'd ever truly loved, waiting to see if he could be more than the success story everyone thought they knew. The elevator chimed, and moments later Brinley Clayton burst into the suite, her Louboutins clicking purposefully across the marble floor. At 28, she was the perfect blend of old money polish and new media savvy, her presence carefully cultivated for maximum impact. She stopped short at the sight of Ren, something flickering behind her practiced smile. Knox, darling, you can't just disappear like that. The Riverstone board is threatening to walk, and Mother's having one of her episodes. Her eyes darted between Ren and Margaret. Though I see you have a situation to handle. Brinley, Knox's voice carried a warning edge. This isn't a situation. This is Ren, my daughter. The word hung in the air the first time he'd said it aloud. Wren looked up from her hot chocolate, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Of course, Brinley recovered smoothly, though her knuckles whitened around her designer handbag. And we'll handle this with the utmost discretion. I know an excellent PR firm that specializes in family reunions. We can control the narrative, release the story on our terms. There's no narrative to control, Margaret interjected, her quiet voice carrying unexpected steel. This isn't about your family's image. This is about a little girl who just lost her mother and found her father. Wren pulled another letter from her stack, her hands trembling slightly. Mom wrote about you too, Miss Clayton. She saw the article about how you and Mr. Blackwood became siblings when your mom married his dad. She said it was good he had family around him, people to keep him grounded while he reached for the stars. Brinley's carefully composed expression faltered. She sank onto the sofa looking at Wren with new eyes. Juniper, she knew about us? About our family? Mom kept every article, every magazine cover, Wren continued, opening her sketchbook to reveal a carefully preserved clipping. This was her favorite, the one about the children's hospital wing Knox's company funded. She said it proved she made the right choice, letting him follow his path. Knox moved to the window, his reflection ghostly against the darkening sky. The city lights were coming on, each one representing a life touched by his technology, his success. But what had that success cost? How many moments had he missed with the daughter he never knew he had? Do you draw? He asked suddenly, turning back to Wren. Like your mother? Wren nodded, flipping to the back of the sketchbook where her own attempts at art filled the pages, less skilled than Juniper's but carrying the same sense of wonder. Mom taught me. She said art helps you see what's real, what matters most. Knox, Brinley began, but he held up a hand. Call Thaddeus. Tell him to handle the Riverstone meeting. And let Cordelia know I won't be at the gala. He looked at Wren, really looked at her. I've missed 10 years of what matters most. I'm not missing another minute. Brinley stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced precision. But before she could respond, her phone lit up with a message that made her inhale sharply. The press somehow got wind of this. They're gathering in the lobby. Someone must have tipped them off about the scene downstairs. Knox felt a familiar surge of protective anger. The media had been circling him for years, hungry for any glimpse behind his carefully constructed walls. Now they were threatening to turn his daughter's world into tabloid fodder before he'd even had a chance to know her. Margaret reached for Wren's hand. Perhaps we should go, come back another time when things are calmer. No, Knox and Wren said simultaneously, their matching gray eyes meeting in surprise. Another echo of shared DNA, another bridge across the years of separation. I have a private elevator, Knox said, his mind already formulating plans. And a house in the Berkshires where the press can't reach. If you're willing, both of you, we could go there. Really talk. Really get to know each other. The hope in Wren's eyes made his throat tight. She looked at her aunt, who gave a small nod. Mom's letters, Wren said softly, they're all about the past. Maybe it's time to start writing our own story? The private elevator descended smoothly to the hotel's underground garage, where Knox's personal driver, Russell, waited with a sleek black SUV. Through the tinted windows, Wren watched the city lights blur past as they escaped the growing media circus at the Bellevue Grand. She clutched her mother's letters closer, remembering how Mom would describe the city at night as a jewelry box spilled across black velvet. Your mother, Knox said softly from the seat beside her, she always saw beauty in everything. Even in that terrible diner coffee. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. She used to draw on the paper napkins, little cartoons that made everyone laugh. Margaret, sitting across from them, pulled something from her purse, a carefully preserved napkin with a faded sketch of a younger Knox, surrounded by laptop computers with lightning bolts shooting from them. She kept this one. Said it was from the night you first told her about your dream to revolutionize medical software. Knox stared at the napkin, his fingers hovering over the sketch without touching it. I remember that night. I was talking about neural networks and data processing, probably making no sense at all. But Juniper, she just listened. Then she drew this and said, so basically you're going to be a tech superhero? Is that why you made the Medicare program? Wren asked suddenly. The one that helps doctors talk to each other about patients? Knox turned to her, surprised. You know about Medicare? Mom used it. During her. Wren swallowed hard. Her treatments. She said it was like having all the best doctors in the world working together to help her. She was so proud that you built it. The SUV turned onto the highway heading north toward the Berkshires. Russell, ever discreet, kept his eyes on the road as Knox processed this information. His most successful program, the one that had truly launched Blackwood Tech into the stratosphere, had touched Juniper's life without him even knowing. "Master Knox," Russell spoke up, his voice apologetic. "Miss Thaddeus Blackwood is calling again. She's quite insistent." "Tell Cordelia," Knox began, but Wren interrupted. "She's your stepmom, right? The one who throws all those fancy parties for sick kids." She pulled another magazine clipping from her sketchbook. "Mom said she seemed nice even if she was a little, what was the word, ostentatious?" A genuine laugh escaped Knox. "That's exactly the word for Cordelia." He took the offered phone. "Hello, Cordelia. Yes, I know about the press. No, this isn't a PR crisis. Because she's my daughter and I'm not handling this your way. Yes, I'm sure. No, I don't need your team of experts. I'm taking her to the Berkshire house. Yes, with her aunt. No, I don't care about the Riverstone deal right now." As Knox dealt with his stepmother, Margaret leaned forward. "Wren, sweetheart, are you sure about this? We could go home, take some time to." "Mom's last letter," Wren said firmly, pulling out an envelope that looked newer than the others. "She wrote it 3 days before she left. She said, when you find him, give him a chance. He has the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known, even if he sometimes forgets to listen to it." Knox ended his call, catching the end of Wren's words. The weight of Juniper's faith in him, even after all these years, pressed against his chest. He'd spent a decade building walls around himself, protecting the empire he'd created. Now this 10-year-old girl had walked through them all, armed with nothing but letters and her mother's trust. "Russell," Knox called to the front, "take the coastal route. I want to show Wren the ocean." He turned to his daughter, the word feeling more natural each time he thought it. "Your mom and I used to drive up here sometimes just watching the waves. She always said the ocean made everything feel possible." As the SUV curved along the coastline, the moon cast a silver path across the dark water. Wren pressed her face to the window, her breath fogging the glass. For a moment, Knox saw himself at her age, full of dreams he couldn't quite name. He'd achieved more than he'd ever imagined back then, but somehow this quiet moment, watching his daughter discover the same view that had once captivated her mother, felt bigger than any business deal he'd ever closed. The Berkshire house emerged from the darkness like a modern fairy tale, glass and stone rising organically from the clifftop, its warm lights promising shelter from the growing coastal wind. As Russell guided the SUV up the private drive, Wren's eyes widened at the sight of waves crashing against the rocks below. "This was my first real purchase," Knox said quietly. "After Medicare took off. I told everyone it was a strategic location for client meetings, but really?" He trailed off, watching the moonlight dance on the water. "Really, I bought it because it reminded me of those drives with your mother. She always said the ocean made her feel infinite." The house's front door opened, spilling light onto the circular drive. A woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes hurried out. "Knox, the news is everywhere. I've been so worried." She stopped short at the sight of Wren, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my." "Wren, this is Valencia," Knox said, helping her out of the car. "She's been taking care of this house, and me, since before I could afford to pay her properly." Valencia's eyes filled with tears. "Those eyes, just like yours, Knox. And her hair, it's exactly like Mom's," Wren finished, pulling out her mother's last letter. "She mentioned you too, Valencia. Said you used to sneak Knox extra muffins when he was working late at the diner, trying to get his first program to work." Valencia reached out, her hands trembling slightly. "Juniper, she remembered me?" "She remembered everything," Margaret said softly, joining them. "Every person who showed kindness, every moment that mattered." Inside, the house was a perfect blend of luxury and comfort. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the moonlit ocean, while soft leather couches and hand-woven throws invited them to relax. Valencia disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later with hot cider and still warm cookies. "Your mother," Valencia said, settling beside Wren, "she used to say that sharing food was like sharing love. No matter how busy Knox got, she'd make him stop and eat something proper." Knox watched as Wren carefully placed a cookie on a napkin, arranging it just so, the same way Juniper used to. How many other little gestures and habits had she inherited? How many pieces of Juniper lived on in their daughter? "I have something to show you," he said suddenly, leading them down a hallway. He stopped at a door, taking a deep breath before opening it. The room was his private art gallery, walls lined with paintings he'd collected over the years. But in the center, illuminated by soft spotlights, hung a familiar piece, A cityscape seen from above, the streets transformed into rivers of light, buildings reaching toward stars that seemed close enough to touch. Mom's painting, Ren whispered, stepping closer. From her first gallery show. She always wondered where it went. Knox touched the frame gently. I bought it through an agent. Couldn't bear the thought of someone else having it. She'd finally gotten into art school, was starting to make her dreams come true. I thought she was better off without me complicating things. She kept painting cities, Margaret said. But never quite like this one. She said this painting was about possibilities, about two people looking down at the same lights, seeing different kinds of magic. Ren opened her sketchbook to a page filled with her own attempts at cityscapes. She taught me to start with the brightest lights first. Said you have to know what's shining before you can draw the shadows. Knox knelt beside her, really looking at her drawings. They were full of the same hope he remembered in Juniper's early work, that blend of reality and dreams that made the ordinary seem magical. Would you like to draw together sometime? I'm not very good, but I'd like to learn. To see the world the way you and your mom do. The smile that lit up Ren's face was pure Juniper, bright enough to outshine all the city lights they'd left behind. Valencia and Margaret exchanged glances, both wiping away tears as they watched this new family begin to find its shape. Outside, waves crashed against the cliffs, their rhythm as ancient and steady as love itself. In his pocket, Knox's phone had finally gone silent, the business world learning to wait while something more important took root in a house by the sea. If you like the story, so like, comment and subscribe to the channel for more good and valuable content like this. The peace of the evening was interrupted by the harsh buzz of Knox's phone. Thaddeus's name flashed on the screen, along with a link to a breaking news article. Knox's jaw tightened as he read the headline. Tech billionaire's secret love child discovered, exclusive details of Knox Blackwood's hidden past. They're saying awful things about Mom, Ren said quietly, looking at her own tablet. Margaret tried to take it away, but Ren held on. They're calling her a gold digger who hid me to get money later. But that's not true. Mom never wanted anything from him. Knox felt a rage he hadn't experienced in years. The media could attack him all they wanted, he was used to it. But Juniper? The woman who'd given up everything to protect his dreams? He wouldn't let them tarnish her memory. Valencia appeared with a tray of tea, her face concerned. The gate security called. Several news vans are parked at the bottom of the drive. They're requesting statements? I have to do something, Knox said, already typing on his phone. I can't let them paint your mother as some kind of... Wait, Ren interrupted, pulling out another letter. Her hands shook slightly as she opened it. Mom wrote about this too. Like she knew it might happen. She began to read, My dearest Ren, if the world ever tries to turn our story into something ugly, remember this. Love isn't about money or fame. It's about the choices we make to protect the dreams of those we care about. Your father's dreams changed the world. My dream was you. And neither of us was wrong. Knox sank onto the sofa, the weight of Juniper's words hitting him like a physical force. Even now, years later, she was protecting both of them, him from scandal, Ren from doubt. Margaret touched the letter gently. Junie always said that truth was like art. It's not about what everyone sees, but what's actually there if you look closely enough. A new message popped up on Knox's phone, Brinley, sending him a carefully crafted press statement, all corporate polish and strategic ambiguity. But as he looked at Ren, still holding her mother's letters, he knew that wasn't the answer. Russell, he called out, knowing his driver was never far. Get the car ready. Ren, would you be willing to help me tell our story? The real story? Not for the press or the company, but for your mom? How? Ren asked, but her eyes were already lighting up with interest. Knox walked to a nearby desk and pulled out a sleek laptop. Your mother used art to show truth. I used technology. Together, maybe we can honor her in both ways. He opened a video program. We'll record our own statement. Simple, honest, just us talking about Juniper and the choices she made. No corporate spin, no PR tactics. Valencia brought over a fresh pot of tea. The study has the best lighting, and those built-in bookshelves would make a nice backdrop. As they set up the impromptu recording space, Knox noticed Ren sketching quickly in her book. What are you drawing? She showed him the rough sketch, a simple but powerful image of three figures formed by intertwined lines. One holding a paintbrush, one holding a computer, and a smaller one between them holding both. Mom always said art should tell stories. Maybe we can use my drawing as the thumbnail for the video? Knox felt a smile tugging at his lips. Of course his daughter would understand both the emotional and technical aspects of digital storytelling. She was, after all, a perfect blend of her parents' worlds. Outside, the media circus was growing, their camera lights visible from the cliff top like artificial stars. But inside, a father and daughter were preparing to share a truth that no headline could capture. A story of love, sacrifice, and dreams that had taken 10 years to finally come full circle. As Knox set up the recording equipment in the study, his phone erupted with a series of rapid-fire messages. Cordelia had apparently seen the news and was en route to the Berkshire house, bringing her entire crisis management team. Following close behind was Thaddeus, warning that the Riverstone board was threatening to pull out of the deal entirely, citing concerns about unstable family dynamics. "They're all coming here?" Wren asked, her voice small. She clutched her sketchbook closer, suddenly looking every bit the 10-year-old she was, rather than the composed young girl who'd walked into the Bellevue Grand just hours ago. Knox paused in his preparations, really looking at his daughter. Behind her confidence and determination, he could see fear flickering in those gray eyes that matched his own. Fear that this fragile new connection would be overwhelmed by the machinery of his complicated life. "No," he said firmly, setting down the camera. "This is our story to tell, no one else's." He pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. "Russell, engage privacy protocol Omega. No one enters the property without my direct authorization. Valencia, would you?" "Already on it," Valencia called from the kitchen, where delicious smells were beginning to waft through the house. "Nothing helps clear heads like my midnight pancakes. It's what I used to make your father when he was stuck on a particularly difficult piece of code." Margaret touched Wren's shoulder gently. "Sweetheart, we can go home if this is too much. Your mother would understand." But Wren shook her head, pulling out a small, worn photograph from between the pages of her sketchbook. It showed a much younger Knox and Juniper sitting at a diner counter, both laughing at something off camera. "Mom kept this hidden in her jewelry box. She said it was the moment she knew she loved you," she said, holding it out to Knox. "Because you were laughing at your own failed joke and it made you seem real." Knox took the photo with trembling hands. He remembered that moment. He tried to make a terrible pun about computer codes and coffee codes, and Juniper had thrown a napkin at him, and somehow it had turned into one of those perfect moments that stay with you forever. "Your mother," he said softly, "had a way of making everyone feel real. Not their jobs or their money or their achievements. Just them." He looked up at the recording equipment, then back at the photo. "Maybe that's what we need to show them." He began to rearrange the study, moving the formal desk aside and bringing in the comfortable leather armchair where he used to read during storms. Valencia appeared with a tray of pancakes, the smell of vanilla and cinnamon filling the air. Even Margaret relaxed slightly, accepting a cup of tea. Instead of a formal statement, Knox said, setting up the camera at a more intimate angle, "Let's just talk. About your mom, about art, about terrible coffee and worse jokes. About real things." Wren's face lit up. She pulled out her latest sketch, the intertwined figures she'd drawn earlier, and began adding details. The pancakes, the ocean view, the way the moonlight spilled through the windows. "Mom always said that the best stories have layers," she explained, her pencil moving confidently across the paper. "Like how this isn't just about us finding each other. It's about her too, and Valencia's pancakes and Margaret's love, and even the angry people outside. It's about how life gets messy but beautiful at the same time." Knox felt something shift in his chest as he watched her work. For years he'd approached every problem with algorithms and flowcharts, trying to optimize every outcome. But here was his daughter, showing him a different way to see the world, through layers and connections, through art and heart. In the distance they could hear cars approaching, probably Cordelia and her team, maybe the press who'd managed to follow them. But inside this room, with the smell of pancakes and the sound of pencil on paper, they were creating something that no crisis management team could package or control. A real moment between a father and daughter, finding their way back to each other through the love of a woman who'd seen the best in both of them. The security system chimed, announcing multiple vehicles at the gate. Through the study windows, they could see the flash of expensive headlights cutting through the coastal mist. Knox's phone lit up with Cordelia's face, but before he could decline the call, Wren touched his arm. "Maybe we should let them in," she said quietly, surprising everyone. "Mom's last letter, she wrote about family. About how it's not just about blood or names, but about who chooses to stand by you when things get complicated." Knox studied his daughter's face, seeing wisdom beyond her years. "Are you sure? Once Cordelia gets involved." "I'm sure," Wren said, pulling out the final letter. "Because Mom also wrote about your stepmom. About how she watched every charity event video, seeing how Mrs. Thaddeus Blackwood always stood beside you, even when you were too busy with work to notice. She said sometimes family is born from loyalty, not just love. Valencia, who had been quietly tidying the kitchen, stepped into the study. The girl has a point, Knox. Cordelia may be overwhelming, but she's never let anyone truly hurt you. Maybe it's time to let her protect both of you? Knox nodded slowly, then pressed the security system's accept button. Minutes later, Cordelia swept into the house, her signature Hermes scarf trailing dramatically. But her usual imperial entrance faltered at the sight of Wren sitting in Knox's reading chair, surrounded by letters and drawings, looking so much like the young woman in the photograph on Knox's desk. "Oh," Cordelia breathed, her carefully maintained facade cracking slightly. "She has your eyes, Knox. And her mother's spirit," Knox finished. "She has Juniper's spirit?" Thaddeus entered behind his mother, tablet in hand, already talking about damage control and stock prices. But he too stopped short when Wren stood and walked over to them, holding out one of her sketches. "I drew this for you," she said to Cordelia. "It's all of us. See, that's you there standing behind Knox, Dad, like you always do in the charity videos. And that's Mr. Thaddeus with his tablet trying to fix things. And there's Valencia with her pancakes and Aunt Margaret with her caring eyes and Mom's in the way the moonlight touches everyone." Cordelia took the drawing with trembling hands, her eyes suspiciously bright. "You've captured us all, haven't you? Just like your mother used to capture the truth of things in her art." "That's what we were about to do," Knox explained, gesturing to the camera setup. "Tell our truth our way. Not a press statement or a corporate strategy. Just our story." Thaddeus lowered his tablet slowly. "The board won't like it. They prefer controlled narratives." "The board doesn't have to like it," Cordelia said suddenly, her voice firm. "This isn't about them. This is about family." She turned to Wren, really looking at her. "Your mother. She gave us an incredible gift, protecting Knox's dreams all these years. Now it's our turn to protect both of you." She pulled out her own phone, perfectly manicured nails clicking against the screen. "I'm calling off the crisis team. But..." She paused, a hint of her usual commanding presence returning. "If you're going to tell your story, let's tell it right. Thaddeus, help Knox with the lighting. Valencia will need more of those pancakes, they smell divine. And Margaret, dear, would you share some of those wonderful stories about Juniper? The world should know what an extraordinary woman she was." As his family mobilized around them, Knox felt Wren slip her small hand into his. "Mom was right," she whispered. "About all of them. About you. About everything." Outside, the moon had risen fully, casting a silver path across the ocean. The same ocean that had witnessed the beginning of Knox and Juniper's story years ago. Now it would witness this new chapter, as their daughter brought together two worlds that had always been meant to merge. If you like the story, so like, comment and subscribe to the channel for more good and valuable content like this. As the family gathered around the camera setup, Brinley arrived, bursting through the door with a stack of prepared statements and media strategies. But she stopped mid-stride, taking in the scene before her. Cordelia arranging flowers in the background, Thaddeus adjusting lighting, Valencia serving fresh pancakes, and Knox sitting beside Wren as they looked through her mother's letters together. "What's happening?" Brinley asked, her PR-polished voice uncertain. "The media is in a frenzy. The Riverstone board is threatening to walk. Social media is exploding with speculation. We need to be a family," Cordelia interrupted, surprising everyone. She gently took the statements from Brinley's hands and set them aside. "Come look at what your niece can do." "Niece?" Brinley repeated softly, the word seeming to shift something in her carefully maintained expression. She moved closer to see Wren's latest sketch, a detailed drawing of the very scene unfolding in the study, but with subtle additions. In the background, barely visible but definitely there, was a figure with curly hair and an artist's smile, watching over them all. "Mom always leaves traces of herself in my drawings," Wren explained, adding final touches to the piece. "Even when I don't mean to put her there. Like she's still guiding my hand sometimes." Knox watched as Brinley sank into a nearby chair, her professional armor cracking. "I remember her," she said suddenly. "Juniper. I was 18, home from my first year at college. I saw you both at that little cafe near the beach. She was laughing at something you said and you looked so happy, Knox. Not successful or powerful. Just happy." "She had that effect on people," Margaret added, sharing a knowing look with Valencia. "Made them forget about their masks and roles." The camera was rolling now, capturing these unscripted moments of truth. Knox found himself speaking without planning his words, something he hadn't done in years. "I spent the last decade building systems to connect people. he said, looking at his daughter. Programs to help doctors share information, platforms to bridge gaps in communication. But I missed the most important connection of all. Your mother? She never missed those connections. She saw them, drew them, celebrated them. Ren opened her sketchbook to a new page and began to draw as Knox spoke. Her pencil moved swiftly, confidently, creating an image of the Bellevue Grand's lobby where they'd first met. But in her version, the cold marble walls were transformed into flowing lines that connected everyone in the scene. The concierge, the receptionist, Knox herself, all linked by invisible threads that only an artist could see. The Riverstone deal, Thaddeus began, but Cordelia silenced him with a look. Will happen or won't happen, she said firmly. But this moment, this is what matters. This is what Juniper protected all those years ago, isn't it? The chance for you both to find each other when the time was right. Outside, the media lights still flickered at the base of the cliff, like earthbound stars waiting for a story. But the real story was happening here, in this warm room filled with the smell of Valencia's pancakes and the sound of pencil on paper, as a family redefined itself around the truth that had always been there, waiting to be discovered. Russell appeared in the doorway. Mr. Blackwood, the Riverstone board is on the line. They're demanding an immediate response. Knox looked at his phone, then at his daughter, still drawing the connections that had always existed between them all. The choice, he realized, wasn't really a choice at all. Some things were simply worth more than business empires and board approvals. Tell them, he said, his voice clear and certain, that sometimes the best innovations come from listening to your heart instead of your algorithms. And right now, my heart is exactly where it needs to be. The news of Knox's decision spread quickly through the business world. Headlines shifted from scandal to speculation about the future of Blackwood Tech. But inside the Clifftop house, time seemed to move differently, measured not in stock prices and board meetings, but in the quiet moments between a father and daughter finding their way to each other. Your mother wrote something here, Knox said, carefully holding one of the older letters, about the night I showed her my first complete program. She says I was so excited I couldn't stop talking about algorithms, but all she could think about was how my eyes lit up when things finally worked right. Ren looked up from where she was adding color to her latest sketch, a detailed rendering of the diner where her parents had first met. Did you know she used to practice drawing your face? There's a whole sketchbook at home full of just you, working on your laptop or talking on the phone. She said she wanted to remember every expression. Cordelia, who had been quietly directing the recording of these intimate moments, wiped away an unexpected tear. All these years, she murmured, we thought we were protecting Knox's legacy. But Juniper, she was protecting something far more precious. Valencia brought fresh tea, her movements deliberately slow as she arranged cups on the antique silver tray. You know, she said, her voice gentle with memory, the day Knox bought this house, the first thing he did was come to the kitchen and try to make coffee the way your mother used to make it for him. Couldn't quite get it right, but he never stopped trying. Because Mom's coffee was magical, Ren said with certainty, pulling out another letter. She wrote about it here, how she'd add a tiny pinch of cinnamon and cardamom, but the real secret ingredient was taking time to care about who you were making it for. Brinley, who had been reviewing the footage they'd recorded, looked up suddenly. This is it, she said, her PR instincts transformed into something more genuine. This is what people need to see. Not a corporate statement or a damage control strategy. Just truth. Real moments. Real family. Margaret touched the latest sketch in Ren's book, the diner scene now complete with warm colors and subtle shadows. Junie would love this, she said softly. Not just the drawing but all of it. The way you're all coming together, the way her art is still bringing out truth. Knox moved to the window, looking out at the ocean that had witnessed so much of his story with Juniper. The moon had begun its descent, painting a silver path across the waves that reminded him of the streak of light in her last gallery painting. Dad? Ren's voice was tentative on the new word. I found one more letter. It's different from the others. She held out an envelope that looked newer, the paper still crisp. Mom wrote it just for you. The room grew quiet as Knox took the envelope with trembling hands. Even Cordelia stepped back, recognizing the sanctity of the moment. As he began to read, Juniper's voice seemed to fill the room, as clear and true as it had been all those years ago in a small diner where dreams were born over cups of perfect coffee. My dearest Knox, if you're reading this, then our daughter has found her way to you, just as I always knew she would. She has your determination and my heart, a combination that can move mountains or, in this case, find billion-dollar CEOs in luxury hotels. Knox's voice trembled as he continued reading Juniper's final letter. I want you to know that every choice I made was out of love. love for you, love for our daughter, love for the dreams we both carried. You were meant to change the world with your brilliant mind, and I was meant to raise the amazing girl who carries both our spirits. Neither of us was wrong in following our paths. When I first discovered I was pregnant, I saw two futures. One where you gave up everything to be with us, and one where you soared free while I nurtured our greatest masterpiece. I chose the second path not because I loved you less, but because I loved you exactly as you were, a dreamer whose innovations would help millions. Tell our Ren that every sketch she draws, every truth she sees, carries echoes of those nights we spent dreaming in that little diner. And Knox, let her teach you what I learned long ago, that sometimes the biggest innovations come not from codes and algorithms, but from the heart's capacity to grow and change in love. As Knox lowered the letter, Ren was already drawing, her pencil flying across paper as she captured this moment. Around them, their newly forged family watched in respectful silence as father and daughter's tears fell together. She's right here with us, Ren whispered, showing her finished sketch. In it, Juniper's presence was drawn as rays of light, connecting everyone in the room through invisible threads of love and understanding. Cordelia stepped forward, her usual commanding presence softened by emotion. The Riverstone board called again. They've withdrawn their threats. It seems your honest approach to this situation has resonated with people. The company's stock is actually rising. Because people recognize truth when they see it, Brinley added, gesturing to the footage they'd recorded. This isn't just a story about a CEO finding his daughter. It's about the courage to choose love over empire, truth over image, family over fortune. Valencia appeared with a fresh pot of coffee, made exactly as Juniper used to make it, with tiny pinches of cinnamon and cardamom, and that secret ingredient of caring about who it was for. As the aroma filled the room, Knox pulled out his phone and made one final call. Janet? Cancel all my meetings for the next month. And contact the contractors who built the children's wing at Cedar Grove Hospital. I want to add an art therapy center. Name it after Juniper Reeves. Margaret squeezed Ren's hand as Knox continued, and Janet? Tell them to include a coffee shop in the plans. The best coffee shop anyone's ever seen in a hospital. Because sometimes the smallest comforts carry the biggest love. As dawn broke over the ocean, painting the sky in colors Juniper would have loved to capture, Knox and Ren sat together at his desk. She taught him how to hold a pencil properly for sketching, while he showed her how to write a simple line of code. Two worlds merging just as they were always meant to. The moral of this story is that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or achievements, but in the courage to recognize love in all its forms. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go, and sometimes it's being ready to embrace what finally finds its way back to you. Every person's path is unique, but all paths are connected by the invisible threads of love, truth, and family, if we only have the heart to see them. In the end, Knox Blackwood discovered that his greatest innovation wasn't a piece of software or a business empire, but the capacity to open his heart to the masterpiece Juniper had protected all along, their daughter, who carried the best of both their dreams. If you like this beautiful and meaningful story, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you more heartwarming stories that remind us of what truly matters in life. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to never miss our upcoming stories of love, family, and the courage to choose what's truly important. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on Knox and Ren's journey, and how Juniper's love touched your heart. Together, let's spread more stories that make the world a little bit brighter.